the cupcake tutorial and how to do it. So you've got two layers and you want to actually have them showing. So if your layers are nested in your other panels over here, it's a good idea. I like to bring it out so I can see what I'm working on. And also you're going to be concerned with what's happening over in the toolbar on the left. So the other thing that you really want to set up, and take a look at the instructions that I will post, are that you have your zoom tool to be able to zoom in and out with the scroll wheel. Now, some people don't like this and they'd rather do, a Command or Control plus, Command or Control minus. I'm sort of addicted to the scroll wheel to zoom in and out. So it is one of the things that I see when people do layer mask is if you're trying to cut out this cupcake perfectly, and I mean, I'm looking for quality, and why do it unless you're really good at it? And so I see people trying to do the layer mask like at this size, and that just doesn't make any sense. No matter how good your eyes are, it's best to actually really zoom in on the project, and then I hold down the space bar and use the hand tool to move around. And I mean, sometimes I'm in at a microscopic level, and that really helps to do a clean selection. So I want the brush, and the letter B will give me my brush. And the other thing that is really important is to take a look at your settings on your brush. First, up in your options bar, you want to make sure that you're at 100%. I've seen people do a mask and by accident, they might have been at 95% and not even noticed. And what they're doing is leaving 5% of the background behind. And so you get this sort of haze. And what a waste of time that is, because then you have to go back in again and remask it. So you want to make sure for this particular project, there are times to use the opacity lower, which we'll see in future tutorials, but we want to cut out that background at 100%. And then for our brush hardness, what you do is when you're in the image, you can right click and take a look at what the hardness of the brush is. And you should always check this. It's kind of like when you're, about to drive your car and you check, do I have my seatbelt on? Is the emergency brake on? Have you ever driven off with your emergency brake on? You feel pretty stupid. So all these sort of options and brush settings, that's like checking your rearview mirror before you back out of a driveway. So you've got to really take a look at that. And I don't want a very soft brush. I want a pretty clean cut. I might go a little bit lower, maybe 98%. So I have a 2% feather on this. Not much, but just a tiny bit of softness. And so I got that by doing a right click. You can also just go up in the options panel and look at your brushes, but this is a much easier way to do it. Then the other thing that is going to be important is to use your bracket keys to make your brush bigger or make your brush smaller. So you've got a number of shortcuts that are going to help you. That's holding down the space bar for the hand tool, right click for your brush settings, B for the letter brush, hang on. And also, one thing that we learned in a previous video is if you look at the colors in my toolbar, right now I have black and kind of a greenish gray color. That's not going to work for cutting out using the layer mask. I want those default colors. So if you remember, the letter D will give me black and white, or I can click on that little black and white squares. So now, if I just start painting, what's going to happen is I'm just going to be putting down black paint. No good. So I'm going to undo that, Command or Control Z. What I need to do first is to apply a layer mask to this layer. So I want to make sure that I'm on the top layer, which is the cupcake. I'm going to add a layer mask, and there it is. You'll see that blank slate for me to paint on. Very important that you're not on the image. And so if you look closely, if you see that subtle difference between being on the image and being on the layer mask, you'll see the brackets around your layer mask. And actually, if you want a quick tip, okay, I'm doing something, I'm going to delete that layer mask. Before you ever apply your layer mask, one thing that you can do is I will use the lasso tool. That's the letter L. And I can make a real rough cut around this cupcake. This just saves me a little time. And then after I do that, I add the layer mask. Boom. So I just got rid of a whole lot real fast. Now I got to take the time to do the detail work. The key to that is you make your selection first and then click on that add layer mask. Now I go back to B for the brush tool, and notice when I'm painting now, I'm bringing the image back. Why? Take a look over in the toolbar and you'll see that I have white. So the shortcut, I know I'm throwing out a lot of shortcuts here, but you can write them down and this will help you. I'm going to use the letter X. I could use those little arrows to switch back and forth, but the more times you go back and forth, you're wasting time. You're putting wear and tear on your wrist. So if I just hit the letter X, that'll give me a black brush, and now I can start to paint. And I want to, because my eyes aren't what they used to be, I want to come in real close here and start to paint. And now I've got a question mark about whether I leave this shadow. In this case, I'm actually going to come right up and delete that shadow because I think it'll look fake. If I were going to do a bigger project, I'd probably come in and make a brand new shadow. And the other thing is, as I go, I see some people with like a teeny tiny brush, and then they come in here and they're almost removing pixel by pixel. And I actually am a fan of using a very big brush and then going in and just using the edge of that brush to make a much smoother removal. So in other words, I'm using a giant brush and just bumping up against that shadow there. Because if you use a teeny tiny brush, you won't be able to be that steady and you'll actually get a less convincing removal. Okay, so this is where you take your time, is getting a really clean removal of those pixels. And again, I could, spend hours on this, but as you know, the bottom line is, if you remember, you're not erasing. So if you come in and you make a mistake, you take a chunk out of that. All you have to do is hit the X key and bring it back. And then you can start to work again. So my advice to you is make sure that you're working with your image big enough that you're able to see how clean, the last thing you want is to leave a little bit of that behind. So you're looking for a super clean removal of that background. And if you master this skill, you will apply this in so many other ways. See, I'm getting all into it now. I can't stop. In the end, what you want to end up with is the cupcake just sitting. Oh, I can see I didn't do a good job right there. It's just sitting in the middle of that field by itself. So that is your challenge. And to turn it in, what you should do is right click your top image. And by the way, if you right click on the mask itself, it'll ask you to apply the mask or delete the mask. That's just handy to know. If you want to flatten the image, which is what you need to do before you turn it in, then I would go to this menu, flatten it, and then the last thing I would do is go under File, Save As, and just for ease, we're going to save this on the desktop so we know where it's going. And I would save it as a JPEG to turn it in. I'm not a fan of JPEGs, but it just makes turning it in online. That's what JPEGs are good for, is compressing the image and making it easy to transfer. So you could save it as a JPEG. You could call it Cupcake with your first and last name, and you are done with this project. But I just want to remind you that what I'm looking for here is not just doing the project, but really showing off how precise you can be and really learning how to be precise with this tool. That's it. I hope you have fun placing that cupcake in the middle of a field like a UFO.